Welcome to the 10th annual A Place to Call Home program and the first ever Clare Housing get-together at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. It's so exciting that so many of you have jumped aboard the Clare van. I promise that you are in for an inspiring hour. And yes, I mean it when I say an hour. Afterwards, we have some great performances lined up, as well as the showing of Rent. My name is Cheryl Jensen, and I'm the managing partner of Strategic Consulting and Coaching. And earlier this year, I served as the interim executive director at Clare Housing. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge some very important supporters of Clare Housing. Community sponsors have contributed over $95,000 to this event. And there is also a $25,000 in matching challenge grant available to unlock as well. In particular, I'd like to call out and thank our visionary sponsor, Gilead Sciences, and our legacy sponsor, Geratom Medical and Dominium, for their generous gifts. Next, let's take a moment to thank our Clare Van host. Clare Van host, please honk your horns. Let people know you are here. You play a key role in helping spread the gospel of Clare Housing. To the Clare Van staff, every day you show up and transform the lives of the people you serve. This year, more than ever, you earned our deepest gratitude. Thank you. And finally, to the residents of Clare Housing, you are the reason we are here. Your stories uplift us, encourage us, and motivate us to keep working until everyone living with HIV in Minnesota has a place to call home. Thank you for having the generosity to share your stories tonight. Finally, thanks to all of you for opening your hearts to the residents by joining us. Back in September, when I was asked by Don Moshkal, the board president, to serve as interim, I was told that this organization was the most solidly built and smoothest running nonprofit that I would ever be able to serve. This was going to be an easy job, and let me tell you, it was. But then March hit, and COVID-19 changed everything. Suddenly, I found myself at the helm of an organization that had a very serious responsibility of protecting the health of over 250 residents who are compromised because of their HIV status. Suddenly, my cakewalk turned into something else. But I was never alone. And when the call came to transform the day-to-day work we do, the staff answered. This community and the board answered. And the residents of Clare Housing answered the call to help their neighbors and themselves as well. Our staff pulled together and put into place PPE, social distancing, and cleaning regimes needed to wage the war yet against another virus that threatens the lives of our residents. Truly, I am at awe at how Clare Housing has stepped up during these exceptional times. Well, Don, if you are out there tonight in the audience, I'd like to take this moment to give you a hard time. No, thanks to the coronavirus, this has not been the easiest job as interim I have ever had. But I will tell you what is easy: supporting this organization. Truly, Clare Housing is a special place, a place that should be protected and grown. Now more than ever, the whole world knows that housing is health care. Now more than ever, we agree that everyone deserves a place to call home. I am proud to have served during these difficult times. I am proud now to continue to support this organization as a new donor. Tonight, I hope you find the choice to support Clare Housing an easy one too. At this time, I'd like to invite Michelle Boyer to the stage.
Good evening. This evening I was asked to give my reflections of the year 2020 and what it has meant to myself and to the staff of Clare Housing. So I will be taking the next 6 hours at this podium to do so. How does an agency survive a triple pandemic? I have found inspiration this year reading the words of Valerie Carr, a renowned Sikh activist, writer, filmmaker, and civil rights lawyer. In her book, See No Stranger, Valerie recaps her speech from a 2016 gathering at a historically black church in Washington, D.C., given about 6 weeks after the 2016 presidential election. "The future is dark," she stated, "but what if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but rather the darkness of the womb? What if our America is not dead, but a country that is waiting to be born? What if the story of America is one long labor?" She goes on to say, what if this moment is our nation's greatest transition? And what, Valerie asks, does the midwife tell us to do during that long labor? To breathe and then to push. Valerie states that a revolutionary love towards others and a transformation towards justice is the spiritual call of our time. This love, she writes, is a quest to see no other human as a stranger, but rather to look at the other and say, "You are a part of me that I do not yet know." And I must add that revolutionary love is not only a feeling, but an action as well. Clare Housing expressed this kind of revolutionary love back in the late 1980s when the imminent call to care for and provide a home to persons with HIV and AIDS. We learned to love and serve during the early days of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, seeing no stranger in our midst. We modern staff at Clare Housing are direct descendants of these founders, the brave women and men who responded to that call. Our founders, early staff, and volunteers listened deeply to our clients, who taught us that homophobia, ignorance, and fear were the underlying societal viruses that we needed to treat. We breathed into this truth and we started to push. We started to understand that the fight for HIV justice was deeply entwined for the fight for LGBTQ rights. And we learned that coming together in community, as gay men, as lesbians, as straight allies, as parents and siblings of those infected with HIV, that together we could form powerful alliances and coalitions. These social justice battles in the streets with ACT UP, and in coalitions with government entities and in the state and federal courts, these battles were just as important for survival as the antiretroviral medications that were being developed in the labs. And we started to see that economic injustice played some sort of role here, noticing that men and women from poor socioeconomic communities seemed to be more at risk of HIV infection. We made the connection that Black and brown and indigenous people in our communities are more likely to be economically disadvantaged, more likely to experience barriers to health care, more likely to be survivors of abuse and trauma, and that these factors put folks at great risk of HIV infection. We saw that our transgender sisters and brothers suffered even greater levels of stigma, oppression, and violence, and we knew to keep breathing and then to push. We pushed out new ways of caring for the ill. We pushed out new and innovative supportive housing models. We pushed out new partnerships with other housing agencies, and we forged new partnerships with government entities. We created new ways of meeting our clients where they're at, and pushed out the best compassionate services we possibly could give. We passed on our experiences, our grit, our resilience onto others, so that this knowledge has remained in our agency's DNA ever since. We learned that revolutionary love means taking right action at the right time, and in being in deep relationship with our clients and with each other is the only healing antidote for HIV. We were working in this headspace in 2020 as our year began. And so when March of 2020 arrived, we already had some of the experience and aptitude to deal with this new global pandemic. Don't let me fool you, COVID-19 was and still is a tremendous strain on our residents and staff. Knowing that we serve some of the most vulnerable folks in our community, COVID-19 felt to me like a heavy, wet blanket being laid over us. There was a damp, heavy fear in the air. There was suddenly a feeling of constriction, of stuckness on the one hand with a racing anxiety on the other. We were terrified that we would not be able to contain COVID-19 if there was an outbreak in one of our buildings. Our Director of Nursing, Megan Williams, got to work immediately researching and writing protocols to keep us safe. On the social service side, we were managing our clients' fears, our direct staff person's fears, and our own family's fears and anxieties. There were new procedures and policies that were critical that we do correctly and consistently to keep everyone safe. And this burden caused us daily stress and strain. Amazingly, our staff showed their commitment and resilience, continuing to show up day after day in stressful and oppressive conditions for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Only one part-time employee decided to step down from work due to risks she believed were inherent in the job. But after all, we were used to epidemics and viruses and managing great risks. As we started to compare the two pandemics, HIV and COVID, a familiar pattern arose. Folks at highest risk of morbidity with COVID-19 were folks who have experienced long-standing social and health inequities in our society. Black and brown folks, indigenous folks, homeless persons, low-income Americans, people with pre-existing health conditions, and the elderly. Once again, we were witnessing a virus in our midst which exposed deep inequities in our society. Although we saw the connections between these two pandemics, HIV and COVID, it became hard for us to follow Valerie Carr's mantra, to breathe and then to push. The masks made it hard to breathe. We had less space in which to operate. The anxiety we had made any breaths we could take short and shallow and quick. We were not sure what the outcome we were pushing for, except for a sort of day-to-day survival in the trenches with no clear end in sight. And then George Floyd was murdered. George Floyd's death on Monday, May 25th, 2020, brought the third pandemic into view for us here at Clare Housing and put 32 years of HIV work into the clearest context. This new lens helped broaden our view while also honing in on an acutely focused problem. The pandemic of white supremacy culture, the granddaddy of all pandemics, was now front and center. The pain from 400 years of white supremacy oppression, including police brutality on black and brown people, could no longer be contained by black folks and their allies. This pain spilled out of individual hearts and minds and into the streets of Minneapolis in a way that none of us had ever seen in our lifetime. Being that Clare Housing develops affordable housing buildings in the central city, at least 5 of our properties were directly impacted by the unrest that occurred in the week after George's death. The heroism from our residents and staff was truly unparalleled at this time. On Friday, May 28th, 14 staff members and volunteers were called into immediate action to evacuate all of Clare Midtown, our largest supportive housing site, when the building lost all of its electrical power. Elevators, lights, refrigerators, and air conditioning were no longer running, and Xcel Energy could not tell us when service would be restored. Our computers and client software programs with medication orders and other vital health information were down. It was a hot week, and so without air conditioning, residents were opening their windows there to cool down. But instead of fresh air, oily smoke and sirens filled their apartments. The National Guard had been called to town and was set up with trucks and tanks less than 1 block away from us. It was time to act. We made the decision to evacuate the building and relocate everyone to a safer location. Employees from other sites came to help us. Staff members came off of PTO and vacations. Volunteers drove in from all over town to assist us in this evacuation. Our nursing staff packed up the entire nursing office, including all medications, medical equipment, laptops, resident charts. The contents of the entire nursing office was packed into an SUV and transported to the safe hotel, where it was unloaded into a makeshift, I guess the new word is pop-up, nursing office. Staff assisted 34 clients in packing up their overnight bags, their walkers, wheelchairs, scooters, and bicycles, and loaded them all into 6 different vehicles that made multiple round trips from Clare Midtown to the hotel. This colossal effort was a beautiful throwback of sorts to our grassroots, roll up your sleeves, get her done agency history. Revolutionary love was in motion. I have never been so proud of our agency's immediate response to an absolutely life-threatening situation. And the heroic acts at Clare Midtown was not all. All over town that weekend, staff made harrowing trips through the citywide curfew hours to get to their appointed shifts, some staff shifts starting at 11 p.m. This happened 24 hours a day, all week long. Managers were on their cell phone calls with staff as they were driving just to make sure they arrived safely. Some staff stayed on after their shifts to do double shifts if their coworkers could not get across town. Some staff slept at our buildings rather than risk traveling back home. Multiple staff came to our care home sites to double staff the overnight shifts, ensuring that residents felt safer and that the building and grounds could be better supervised and protected. That weekend, I will claim, was collectively the most intense in the history of Clare housing. As we heard chants of "I can't breathe" and heard the names of so many Black and brown persons killed by police brutality, we understood in the most visceral way the deep truth of who it is that suffers most from these three pandemics, who it is that is most likely to become HIV positive, who it is that is most likely to acquire and die from COVID, who it is that experiences poverty and homelessness at the highest rates, who suffers from the worst health outcomes, who are the most likely persons to be victims of abuse, neglect, and trauma. For as the researcher and speaker Brené Brown says, the system is not broken. The system is working exactly as it was designed to work, to benefit white people at the expense of people of color. So for those of us who can breathe, those of us with some privilege or resources or space or power, we must keep breathing and pushing so that we can push down racist structures that keep people of color down. We must engage in the revolution, those acts of revolutionary love that calls us forth to see no stranger and to embrace and fight for equality. We must continue to affirm that Black lives matter, that Black gay lives matter, that Black trans lives matter, that Black HIV positive lives matter. And Clare Housing and her supporters must keep pushing to birth a better, more just, and equitable society. Let's defeat the triple pandemic by creating a world where everyone has access to affordable housing, comprehensive health care, and equal opportunities to pursue their life dreams. Thank you.
My earliest memory, probably drinking beer with my dad when I was probably 3 years old. My mother was very abusive and neglectful, and my father was also abusive to my mother. When they got a divorce, I was 6 years old. I was taken away from my mom for her throwing me into a wall and knocking me out and rolling me up in a blanket and sheets, thinking that I was dead, and put me underneath the bed and left me there for 2 days. I went from a group home to foster care, then to my grandparents, back to another foster care, and back to my grandparents. So at age 13 years old, I came out to my grandparents. My grandmother told me that, that's against our religion. You can't be gay, basically. In 14, they kicked me out, and I became homeless. At 14, I met Denise. She became my foster mother.
I think he was wanting a permanent home and to feel like part of a family, but his behaviors were so challenging because he didn't trust anyone. Perpich was one of the miracles that happened. Dance was his primary area of interest. He did a fantastic job. They were very creative and really worked with him as well and offered special ed support.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't mind. Denise means to me, I'm grateful for her. If it wasn't for her, I would probably not be sitting in this chair right now.
After he left foster care and was independent is when he really started experimenting with drugs and alcohol and some more other risky behaviors.
Trying to cover up the trauma and the shame and the regret, the self-hating kind of feelings that I had. Dangerous to the point where I was doing things that were harmful to my body. Smoking meth, having unprotected sex with people that I had no clue who they were. About 3 years ago, I was homeless. Instead of using drugs and going to people's houses, I had to figure out something. This would be my third lease and the longest stable housing that I've ever had. Where would I be without Claire Housing? I don't even want to think about that. I would probably be dead, absolutely. A place to call home is so key to people's recovery. And when you're homeless, you're in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, it's very hard to be healthy. And I owe it to Claire Housing because they gave me a home to let me, become more healthy and create, the life that I've always wanted. Good morning, Alex. I go every single morning at 10 o'clock to cross the alley at Claire Housing, and I take my meds. They just put a tray in front of me. It's like more of a accountability at that point for me. When the virus came and then the riots came, it was very hard. Claire Housing actually arranged for Metro Transit to pick up groceries at Aliveness Project. Without them, I would be hungry multiple days since the virus and since the protest. They're super quick to react to the shortcomings in our society today, which happen to be, how do we get our clients fed, and how do we make sure that they stay healthy, and how do we make sure that they stay connected. Claire Housing gave me a home to create restructure and routine that has let me become the best that I can be every single day, every moment, and all because of Claire Housing, because they gave me a home that I can become more healthy because I want to be the best that I can be.
As last year's first recipient of the Housing Hero Award, I have the honor of announcing this year's award winner. This award recognizes the work of a staff member, volunteer, or donor who has made an exceptional contribution towards creating home, health, and hope for individuals living with HIV. And this year, 2020, keeping residents and staff healthy has been our #1 priority. That being said, it is truly my honor to announce that this year's honoree is Claire Housing's Director of Nursing, Megan Williams. Megan's credentials, as well as her outstanding 10-year track record, would take the entire hour for me to describe. Sadly, time is short, and so I must focus on Megan's work this year. When the gravity of the COVID pandemic became clear, Megan immediately began to implement a multitude of policies and protocols to keep residents and staff safe. She also made herself available via email, calls, and text 24 hours a day to any staff member that might have questions. Thanks to the effectiveness of her policies to date, only 7 of our over 250 residents have tested positive for COVID-19. All are recovering. And only 1 staff member out of 90 staff members has tested positive. Considering how quickly this illness could spread among our immunocompromised people, these results are incredibly impressive, especially given that our residents are able to come and go freely. Claire Housing has benefited greatly from Megan's unique combination of education, her prior HIV work experience, both domestically and internationally, her passion for excellence, her advocacy for a strong nursing presence in our agency, and in her solid leadership. Her work has set the foundation for us to address future challenges in HIV housing and care for many years to come. Now I'd like to ask Megan to come up and accept this most well-deserved award.
have hope. I was hopeless before. And my mental health, my physical health, everything is coming back so that I can re-enter into society as a productive human being. I had 2 years sober. I feel like it's the next step on my road to being a bona fide and respected artist. I needed them, and they were there when I had no one else.
Hi everyone, I'm Phoebe Trepp and I'm extremely happy and proud to talk to you tonight and introduce myself as Clare Housing's new Executive Director. First, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of you for the simple act of joining us tonight, both online and in person. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken things from many of us, our sense of security, our livelihood, our health and well-being, and in some cases, even lives. For me, it's taken away my ability to stand before you tonight. I've been in contact with someone diagnosed with COVID and need to self-isolate for the next 10 days. But knowing that over 300 of you signed up to attend, I know the pandemic has not taken away our hope. It has not taken away that most simple and profound human desire to connect and to uplift one another. I am truly humbled by your presence. Thank you. So, when I was asked to write this speech, our communication person said I couldn't just give you facts and figures about Clare Housing's success, but that I had to also tell you something about me, since this is my first introduction to many of you. And I'm going to try to do all of that in 10 minutes. I'll tell you a little about my past. For starters, I've got a bachelor's degree in math and women's studies, which really does not illuminate how I ended up at Clare Housing. And like a lot of us liberal arts grads out there, I got my degree, then found my life's purpose off the beaten path, away from my Diffie-Q textbooks and my graphing calculator. My work for the past 20 years has been in the field of housing and homelessness. I've found joy and struggle in the different paths I've explored. One path that shaped my career very early on led me to the hills of Appalachia in the summer of 2000 and to the home of Jack and Penny. This was the summer that showed me the power of community and how together we can build a better future. Jack and Penny were an older couple, and Jack had worked all his life as an electrician. Injured on the job and unable to work, Jack was in a wheelchair when I first met him. Their house did not have a ramp. Penny did her best carrying her husband in and out of the house, but it was physically and emotionally very difficult. So difficult that eventually Jack stopped leaving the house altogether. That's when the nonprofit agency I worked for, the Appalachia Service Project, came to know Jack and Penny. Together, we created a plan to change their housing situation. There are many moments that I remember from that summer. I remember the brakes going out on the way to their house, causing us to drive our truck directly into the side of a mountain. I remember Penny making us biscuits and gravy in her kitchen for breakfast or dinner whenever we were there. I remember Jack sitting in his brown recliner, doing his very best to convince me that I should forget the math degree and become an electrician just like him. I remember the day the ramp was completed. Jack got to leave his house again on his own, unassisted for the first time in years. Jack was a man who was used to taking care of himself. He had worked hard, played hard, and loved being with Penny. The day the ramp was complete and he wheeled himself out to the street, he regained his ability to care for himself, his dignity, and relief. Such relief. He was free to leave his home at his will. he would be able to continue to live with Penny without putting her at risk on a daily basis, and all due to a very simple solution. So I tell you that story because it highlights why I am so passionate about Clare Housing. This story exemplifies the best of what, with the help of so many, Clare Housing does too. That summer we built a ramp, but Jack, when he rolled down that ramp, took back his dignity and his future. What Clare Housing provides at first seems just as simple as that ramp we built. Clare Housing is 4 walls and a door, but the space inside is so much more. Within our walls, our residents are able to restore not just their housing and their health, but their dignity and their future, their hope as well. It was humbling back then to see what that simple wooden ramp did for Jack. It's humbling now to see the work we do at Clare Housing. I have seen the radical transformational effect having a home has on the health and well-being of our residents living with HIV. I am happy to tell you that what we're doing at Clare Housing is working. And it's not just working well, it's working like unbelievably well. And what we need to do is to do more of it. I know it's working because of our outcomes. All of our residents, 100% of them, are connected to healthcare providers. Thanks to those connections, a full 90% of our residents are undetectable. That means the HIV virus can no longer be detected in blood tests. Nationwide, only 63% of people living with HIV are undetectable. And this matters because if you are undetectable, you cannot transmit the virus to a sexual partner. Undetectable is untransmittable. In a very real way, by taking control of their health, our residents are preventing the spread of HIV here in Minnesota. What we're doing is working, and fortunately, we are ready and willing to do more of it. Thanks to a partnership with Project for Pride in Living, we will be operating a new 42-unit apartment building called Bloom Lake Flats in 2022. For the first time in our history, this building will contain 15 units set aside specifically for families. More than 42 people living with and affected by HIV will gain affordable housing with access to health care. That being said, we know that there are still more who need our help. According to statistics from the Minnesota HIV Housing Coalition, roughly 1,000 people living with HIV remain unstably housed. At Clare Housing alone, our waiting list is over 360 people. One apartment building will help, but it will not close that gap completely. My commitment to you all today is to help find a way to ensure that someday soon, everyone living with HIV in Minnesota has a place to call home. There are many ways we can make this vision possible, and fortunately, we are not alone in our efforts. Through a combination of new developments like Bloom Lake Flats, the continued expansion of our scattered site program, and public policy efforts, we can make that vision a reality. The time for this commitment is now, and the stakes could not be any clearer. If there's one thing that COVID-19 has made all of us understand, it is that housing is healthcare. And that's true for all of us listening here tonight, for all of our residents and the people yet on our waiting list, and for all the people out there like Jack and Penny who befriended me so long ago. Some of you might be wondering whatever happened to Jack and Penny. Jack and I stayed in touch for a few years, writing letters back and forth, but I graduated from college, and I'm sad to say we eventually did lose touch. Still, I do wish he could be with us tonight. If he were, I'm sure he would be more than a little disappointed to find that I did not become an electrician like he wanted me to. But I think he would also be happy for me in this new role, knowing that I found my people, the staff here at Clare Housing, and all of you here tonight, the type of people who build ramps, who believe in homes for all, and who are actively creating a future generation without HIV. Thank you so much.
My name is Jeff Eberhard. I'm the Supportive Services Manager here at Clare Midtown. I think the way that I would consider the work that I do here is to really be a consistent presence, to be available to folks, to meet them in the moment that they need somebody to be with them. Is there some hesitation about asking me to help you with this? We know that folks living with HIV who are homeless have a harder time accessing medical care, and therefore their viral loads are generally considered detectable because they don't have easy access to the medications, to the other support that they need to maintain their physical health. I see my role and the role of the other Clare Housing staff as providing that consistent, compassionate environment where relationships can happen. When we started to realize that COVID-19 was going to be an issue in Minnesota, we put into place strategies that were going to help us to mitigate the risk that we knew was happening around us. It was a real challenge, and it has been very difficult as the months have gone on to realize that this is now the way that our work environment is going to be. For our staff, it's been difficult to come to work and know that you are going to be behind a surgical mask for your shift, and to maybe have to wear more protective equipment if you're having to provide one-on-one care with somebody. There has been a lot of fear and concern about contracting COVID. I think the biggest challenge that our folks have experienced is an increased sense of isolation, of loneliness. One of the things that we had to put into place pretty early on was that we were not allowing guests into our buildings, and that has been very difficult for most of our folks. I think it was a concern early on that I was not going to be able to make the same kind of connections with folks, either through phone calls or through Zoom technology or some other kind of video technology. I've been actually very surprised that the connections have been able to be developed and maintained in spite of the efforts that we had to put into place. When I had heard about George Floyd being murdered by police, I knew that it was going to have an impact on all of us. Here at Midtown, we're a mile or mile and a half from where that happened with George Floyd. At that point, I don't think that we could have imagined that it was going to grow to the level that it did. 2 blocks away, the police station was burning, the Target was burning, the Cub Foods was burning, the AutoZone was burning. We didn't know what was coming next. We needed to evacuate the building. I had told my leadership team that I would be the last person to leave, and there was one person left in the building that was going to be packing some things up. And so I was at the front desk, and I was able to see a couple of young men sitting out in front of the building. And so I went out and offered them some water. They had obviously been a part of the protests, and they were just taking a minute to rest and wash their face. And so I just wished them well and went back inside. A couple of minutes later, I saw them in the front entrance of our building, and it was obvious that they were facing east and taking a minute to pray. I went out there and I said, listen, I saw that you were in here, and I felt like I was invading something that I shouldn't have been watching, but I just wanted to come out and acknowledge that what I just witnessed gave me a great sense of peace. So I told them that this was affordable housing, and that we didn't have anybody in the building for the weekend, and I just asked them, if this needs to be a safe place for you for the weekend, that's fine, but just please tell other people that this is also a safe place for them, and keep an eye out on our building for us. Seeing them take a break from something that obviously meant a lot to them to do something that was central and core to their being, my initial thought was, maybe the world is going to be okay after all. When we made the decision on Sunday that we were going to move people home on Monday, what I was most struck by after talking to this group of folks is that every single one of them said thank you. Every single one of them showed gratitude. Robert, I'm glad that things worked out, and we're glad that you're home. A majority of the folks that we serve with Clare Housing here at Midtown have been through trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma, and now they've lived through yet another trauma in their neighborhood. The resiliency, the courage, the tenacity, the bravery.
Thank you, Ducky, Denise, Tim, and Jeff, for sharing your stories with us. Trust me, it takes a lot of courage to be so candid and vulnerable in front of so many people. I am humbled and honored to share this stage with you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Brewster, and I'm here this evening to raise some money and have some fun while we're raising money for Clare Housing. I was told I would have exactly 7 minutes to speak. You do realize you've given a microphone to a drag queen? This year, Triangle of Hope is celebrating their 25th year of raising money for Clare Housing, which means it's also my 25th anniversary of performing. I started when I was 2. I've been on a lot of stages in those years, but I couldn't be more thrilled to be on this stage tonight. As a longtime supporter of this organization, I'm excited to ask you to make a lasting investment, to join me with your support and become a Journey Home Circle member by making a multi-year pledge to Clare Housing. But before I formally ask you to join us, I would like to quickly, and quickly is underlined here, share why I believe Clare is so important. When I first started my career 25 years ago, I was fundraising for individuals dying of HIV and AIDS. Fast forward 2.5 decades, and I'm still fundraising, but now for individuals living with HIV and AIDS. Clare Housing has been a leader in changing the face of this disease. It's no longer the gay man like my best friend Ronnie Morgan, who lost his battle in 2000. It's women, it's children, it's families. A thriving rainbow of colors, all with one thing in common: the basic need for attainable housing. So as I mentioned earlier, I am honored to ask you to join me today in supporting those amazing individuals living in overwhelming situations. The time to support Clare Housing is now. Clare Housing has faced many challenges during this unprecedented year. There continues to be over 1,000 individuals in the state of Minnesota who are HIV positive and are in need of permanent housing solutions. And while we have seen unparalleled growth over the last several years, increasing our housing capacity to 214 units, we know that the need continues to outspace the number of units available. The solution to ending homelessness for people living with HIV is housing. We know that. For some of us, it means support services. For others, it means rental subsidies. For some, it means hearing yes when there's a history of incarceration. For all of us, it means a home of our own. I'm here to ask you to make a deep and lasting impact today by making a financial contribution to this remarkable organization. And for those of you who are able, we are asking you to join as a Journey Home Circle member. On the pledge form you received in your packet, you will find our Journey Home Circle levels. You'll notice that there are also options to pledge jointly with a partner and to set up monthly payment schedules. We hope many of you join us by making a multi-year Journey Home Circle level gift. So take out those pledge forms, grab your pen, and get ready. As an incentive, I'm thrilled to share that we have $25,000 in matching funds for this evening thanks to the HRK Foundation, longtime donor Lorraine Hart, and an anonymous donor. We are deeply grateful for their support. So this means that any new or increased gift and or multi-year pledge at any level will be matched dollar for dollar up to $25,000. Maybe there's someone out there right now who wants to jump out of their car, wave your hands, and get the donations going by making a $25,000 gift. How amazing would that be? I've got my eyes on you. Go ahead. Is everybody ready to honk their horns? Or maybe tonight's not the night for a $25,000 gift. We'll accept gifts of any size. 20,000, 15,000, do I hear 10,000? Of course, we can go in the other direction too. 50,000, 100,000, I love zeros. We all have different financial means. We are grateful for any gift of any size that is meaningful to you and demonstrates your commitment to Clare Housing. And for those of you here this evening who are currently our Journey Home Circle members, thank you. We are deeply grateful for your investment in our work. As of today, we have raised close to $400,000 towards our $860,000 gap we are facing. Each and every one of you sharing with us this evening, regardless of gift size, can help us build a strong foundation so we can ensure that all people living with HIV in Minnesota will have access to affordable, supportive housing by 2025. Now is the time to open those packets and pull out your pledge forms. I'll give you some time to carefully and legibly finish filling out your form. Remember, your generosity is essential, is the essential something that can make the difference between merely surviving with HIV and truly thriving with it. When you are finished, please put the form in the envelope provided and seal it. But honey, don't leave with it. Drivers, hang on to it. Thank you so much for your support and joining us as we continue our work to ensure all people living with HIV will have a place to call home. At this time, I'd like to invite Clare Housing Board member, Reverend Dwayne Davis, to come and close out our formal program this evening. Thank you.
Wow, what a great event. In light of all the challenges of coping with and adjusting to an unforeseen disruption in how we usually gather, we appreciate how you imagined with us a way to do this important work. I'm Reverend Dwayne Davis, and I'm honored to serve on the Clare Housing Board of Directors. I'm so proud to support the amazing work of Clare Housing staff and volunteers. Their dedicated work brings stability to the lives of our low-income neighbors who are living with HIV and helps prevent the spread of HIV in our community. And because of their creativity and commitment, we are able to meet the challenge of this time and still do amazing work. And I am so grateful for you. Look around this mighty Midway at all of these cars, these beautiful cars. I love cars. You took a chance and came to a completely different kind of event this year to learn about Clare Housing, to meet some of the wonderful people who we support, and to discover the reasons why we do this important work. On behalf of the residents, staff, and board of directors of Clare Housing, thank you for your presence and your financial gifts. We count on this event every year to raise a big portion of Clare's budget so we can provide critical support for our residents. You have made the difference. You've made a huge difference to this community and to the people who call Clare Housing home. Thank you. Because of you, Clare Housing can continue to provide home, health, and hope for 254 individuals in our community every day. Now, please mark your calendars and plan to attend A Place to Call Home next year on Wednesday, September 29th, 2021. Who knows what next year's event might look like? Oh, but these imaginative people at Clare can make it happen. And finally, before you leave, be sure to leave your donation form with one of our wonderful Gay for Good volunteers. Thank you, and God bless you.